Michael,
Yes,
we just recently saw the release of Disney Lorcana.
that's true.
So Disney Lorcana, I would say possibly the most anticipated trading card game, or the most anticipated new release in the trading card genre. Definitely since One Piece, probably even bigger than that, just in terms of hype and excitement. Do you feel so far that Lorcana is the next big thing?
I believe it isn't the next big thing. It is. It is definitely a big thing.
It is a next big thing.
It is a next big thing.
Maybe not the next big thing.
I don't think it's for everyone. I believe it's definitely targeted towards people that are fans of Disney, obviously. But
That's a lot of people.
that is true. I think the trading card game itself is pretty simple. I feel like it's easy to teach new people, but I don't think that people that are well versed in trading card games are just gonna hop onto the game to play the game itself.
You've had a chance to play the game, right?
A little, yeah. I've played one or two games at this point.
What were your thoughts?
It's very easy to teach people. I watched a couple videos on how to play. I taught my sister, and she picked it up very quick. I tried to teach her other trading card games. It wasn't as easy, but with this one, it seemed like it was very easy to teach people.
Interesting. And I think a lot of that, from my experience, because I've also been able to play, comes down to relative straightforwardness in terms of what you can actually do in the game. Like comparing something like Lorcana to something like Magic, I think is an interesting starting point because a lot of superficial similarities exist between them, but Lorcana just really simplifies it in terms of how much complexity and choices there are to make at any given time. There's no instant speed interaction where you're going to be doing things on your opponent's turn and having to know what to do when. It's pretty straightforward in terms of, okay, you have these cards, they do something, and then your turn's over.
Yes.
Almost like the simplicity of the Pokemon turn structure applied to a more broad combat style game.
Yes, yes. I do like the idea of it being you're taking up your counters and trying to get 20 lower counters as opposed to like trying to knock your opponent's health down. I think that's an interesting way to play the game.
That I thought was the worst aspect of it.
Well, why do you say that?
Well, I'd like to hear your thoughts first.
Okay, I think because I'm just imagining as the game goes on and as we get more cards, the idea of like interesting interactions to get more counters up is going to be something I'm looking forward to. But I don't necessarily have anything besides that on why it's a cool idea.
My issue with the lore system, because you're trying to collect a resource called lore, right?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to get your opponent's life points down to 0 like you do in most trading card games, or most combat-based trading card games. It's an interesting idea, but my issue is that I don't think it allows the pace of the game to escalate as you go on and as you get toward the end. Because what you want is to play cards that will give you lore, but the range of lore that you can create from different cards isn't that great. You max out at like 3 on the top end. Usually your cards are creating 1 or 2. Because it's no better in combat to have a card that produces less lore versus more lore, you're mostly just trying to race against your opponent. So if your opponent can get a lead, instead of going back and forth or trading off like you would in a combat-based game, it's just a matter of either you play out more characters and get ahead, or you lose.
That is a very fair point.
Did you play with the starter decks?
I played with the starter decks, yes. I started with the Cruella and Aladdin deck.
Mm-hmm.
That one, I'm not too sure about any of the other ones. I haven't tried those yet, but the Cruella and Aladdin one has been pretty interesting, especially with the idea of an evasive creature. I think something only being able to be targeted by something with that same like text is something we've seen in other trading card games like Magic with flying. I wish they leaned more into that in the Cruella and Aladdin deck because after you only have like one creature in that entire deck that does that, but it feels like it's the creature you lean on the most.
It's a little bit of a janky deck for a starter deck.
Yes.
I've played with all of them and I kind of had the same takeaway. But I think one of the issues that I run into, just as someone who's perhaps a little bit more familiar with combat-based games, is that you have a combat element where things like evasive come into play, but combat doesn't push you toward your win condition, right? So having cards that are better in combat or that can survive better in combat still don't make it easier for you to win. So more often, from what we've seen and from what I've seen just playing with the cards that are out now, it seems that it's easier just to play out a bunch of easy to get out characters and just tip your lore up really high so you can get such a lead that your opponent can't catch up than to try to bother with combat at all.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's really a race at that point.
At the same time, and not to take us in a different direction, this is just looking at the batch of cards that we've got now. I think as a foundation, mechanically it's sound, it plays well, it's easy to pick up, as you said. By the time that you're halfway through the game, you know exactly what you want to be doing, and by the time you're done, you're ready to teach someone else. I think that's always the sign of a good accessible card game.
Yeah.
And I think that hopefully, as we get more of a feel for how these cards work, what's actually going to go into building a strong, I don't know if I should say competitive deck, but a fun and interesting deck,
Yeah.
then it might be a little bit easier to get into exciting game states. Do you think that this is something that just as a product, right, as a new card game, can compare just in terms of the broad appeal to something that's a major player like a Magic or a Pokemon?
I don't think so. I think it's definitely going to be, I hope that they gear it towards collectors more, because I think that's where the market really is right now. Because a lot of people that are buying the game are just buying it for the characters, they're not really buying it to play the game. So I think if they focus towards more like cool designs on the cards, like having cool arts and art cards, I think that can be someplace that they push towards.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen in the past that you don't need to have a game that caters primarily or entirely to players in order for it to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think, not that I have any criticism of the gameplay of Pokemon, it's a great game, but to be completely honest, just from what we see day to day, most of the people who are out there buying Pokemon cards aren't buying it to play the game.
True.
But Pokemon, if you look at that as a brand, it's incredibly strong. If you think of what are the big trading card games that are out there, you have to list Pokemon in your top 3, if not more. So I wonder, can Disney fill a similar niche with Lorcana? Like, is that name recognition, is that brand recognition, is that collectability enough, not necessarily to be the only thing that people go for, but to make up for what might be a relatively slow build in terms of gameplay?
I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, to be honest. I think they would have to change things up a bit in the future, because right now, as far as I know, there aren't too many different variations of the card. I know Pokemon has a lot of variations of the card, and that's, you have the trainer gallery, you have the not borderless, V-Star cards, V cards. Those are the cards that mainly collectors are going towards, but also players. Players are mainly going for the V cards, not necessarily the trainer gallery. I think they should have something like that, where it's just, they have primarily a collector-based card. I know I'm like really focusing on the collectors here, but I think that's kind of where they should focus.
That would be very interesting, because if you're looking at card games that get by on having really strong art, like Pokemon, those cards that you were describing are gorgeous.
Yes.
Right? And that's something where you see that and you say, I want to have that just to have it. Disney, if we're talking about art, I mean, Disney created an entire school of art and animation, right?
Exactly.
Disney is a major player just in terms of style and design. So I think what you're saying is that we should be able to see that in the cards.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, they could be a little bit tough. And also, there can be kind of a back and forth here. Sometimes if we look at the branded like anime trading card games, so things like Weiss Schwartz or some of the Bandai games, it can look a little bit, I don't want to say cheap, but it can be a little bit underwhelming to see cards that are all just stills from the show or movie that they're based on.
Yeah.
Disney with Lorcana has kind of a opposite situation, because it is all original art and it is all unique, and that's something to appreciate, because you're not just looking at things you've already seen, and you can have things that are designed specifically for those cards. But then I think it can be a little bit of a challenge, because those images from those movies are so iconic, and the style and design is such a sentimental thing to a lot of people that when everything is almost like a drawing of a movie as opposed to a still, that can be a little bit underwhelming as well. I feel like there's room to have a balance, and I think that that would also be exciting to me, just as someone who likes looking at pretty cards.
Yeah, like having recreations of certain scenes. I think that would be pretty cool, as like a secondary thing you're collecting.
Do you think that you're going to get involved with the organized play scene as we get that up and running?
I think it would be interesting to take part in, at least try it a little bit.
That's something where we are literally only a couple weeks out from release. So there's not a huge tournament community that's already built up, but there's definitely anticipation and excitement about that, and we're really looking forward to getting that underway and seeing who we can get involved. It's interesting because you said that it's something that isn't necessarily going to speak to people who are enfranchised trading card game players. From what I've seen, a lot of the folks who have been actively playing the game are either current or former Magic players.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
I think that's so great because Magic is such a involved, intense card game, and I just love seeing that you can have appreciation from that same group of people for something that leans on the other side toward the casual and accessible marketplace. And that's a lot of fun. And hopefully with that competitive spirit that comes from the Magic community and that creative deck building mindset, maybe we'll have a lot to discover about this game.
Hopefully.